Hello everyone and welcome to my very first video here on YouTube. This is Sammy from Today is My Favorite Day, and I want to share with you a series on how I make my mini albums, especially my 8x8 mini albums, which I really love to do. I think they are a lot of fun, but they also take a lot of time to finish. So I decided that it's probably best to not put it into just one video and make it a very long tutorial, but instead to cut it into parts and do a series of videos. So in this video today, I'm just going to share with you how I prepare for my mini albums. So first I want to show you which tools I like to use and which I always grab before I do a mini album. And after going through the tools quickly, I am then showing you how I prepare my pages for actually making the mini album. So for the tools I'm going to share with you, I just want to say that some of them are optional. So I'm just sharing all the tools I really love to use when I'm doing mini albums, but I don't think that you actually need all of them, especially not if you're just starting with doing mini albums. So the first tool you actually would need when doing a mini album like this is some kind of a scoreboard. So I really like to use the score and trim board by Real Memory Keepers, but you could also use just a scoreboard. I don't really use the trim function either. So yeah, any scoreboard would work. With a scoreboard, you also need a bone folder. I think you can get them in almost every craft store, and you can probably also find them on Amazon. Mine is by Craftelier Basics, which is an online store here in Europe. And as you can see, I have a small bone folder to score my paper, and then I also got a larger bone folder, which I really like to use, but this is a tool which you probably don't need. You can use something else to burnish your paper down as well. I also got this album tool set by Craftelier Basics. So these tools are especially designed for doing your mini albums, and I think they're very helpful when it comes to making a neat cover for the album. But also they are definitely optional. You can do your cover without the tools, but I will use them in my tutorials, and you will see them in use in my video on how to make the cover. The next thing you definitely need when doing a mini album is some kind of glue, and I would recommend to use a very strong and good glue. I actually like to use the block glue by Craftelier Basics. But I also love the Tombow glue. This is a glue which a lot of crafters use, and it's really strong, it's really good. And as you can see, I always use a large bottle. That's the bottle the block glue by Craftelier comes in. But I also have a smaller bottle with the same glue just to use for small embellishments. The third glue you can see is a glue stick by Scotch, and this one I got recommended by Scrap and Coffee here on YouTube, and she uses it for all her photo mats to make them removable. So this is a removable glue, and I think this is really nice to have as well, but you don't really need it. So it's just for the photo mats if you want to have them removable. This is an eraser by Craftelier Basics as well, and I have to say I really like to use it. It's to remove all your glue marks on your paper, and it works really well. So it's also very cheap, so it's definitely affordable, and I would say you have to get one if you don't have it yet, because when I craft, I'm very messy with my glue, so I can highly recommend to get a glue eraser. Besides my wet glue, I also like to use score tape. It's very strong, and I especially like to use it for the base construction of my album and also for putting my pages together, because it's very strong, as I said, and also very easy to use. You can just whip it off from the roll, and it also is not as messy as using wet glue. You also need a pair of scissors, and as you can see, I have a small one and a large one. They're both by Tim Holtz Tonic, and I actually have other scissors as well, but these ones are the ones I always use when I'm doing a mini album. The next tools which I think are good to have are rulers, and as you can see, I got this triangle ruler, which I basically just used to cut my tags. And I also have a Tim Holtz ruler, a large one, and then a little metal ruler, which I use to just whip off my tape. So it's nothing you really have to have, but it's helpful when it comes to ripping your larger size tapes. I also always use my crocodile and the big bite as well, just because I really like to include eyelets into my albums, onto my tags, especially on the album cover. I always put eyelets and a ribbon closure. So for me, I always use them, but also it's nothing you definitely need to make a mini album. Because I always like to mark my papers and write down when I have to place a magnet somewhere or something else, I also need a basic pencil and a basic eraser. For my ribbon closures, or for my ribbon I like to use with my tags, I always burn the ends so that they don't rip apart. And for this, I just need a lighter. So I always have a lighter in my craft room as well. The last tools I have in my toolbox are punches, especially corner punches. I also like to use a notch punch and a circle punch. So that's it for my tools, and now I want to share with you how I prepare my pages. I think that preparing your pages and cutting everything at once really saves up a lot of time. So I always have my cutting guide, and then I prepare the pages before I do anything else, really. So I always like to cut the chipboard first. The chipboard I use for the album cover, and then I go ahead and cut all the different paper sizes. And I have the cutting guide right with me, so I can check how many papers I need of the different page styles. And I also always label the pages with the number or letters. So on my cutting sheet, every page style has a number or a letter, and I write it down on the page as well. For cutting my pages, I like to use my large guillotine trimmer, which I got from Amazon. I'm not sure about the brand, but it cuts really well, and you could also cut multiple pages at once. Sometimes I do that, but for my base construction of the album, for the base pages, I'm always a little bit careful, because if you cut more than just one sheet, sometimes the measurements are a little bit off. After cutting and labeling all the different papers I need for my pages, I get my scoreboard, and then I start doing my score lines on the papers. So I always like to align the sheet to the very left of the scoreboard. And as you can see, there is the inch scale on the bottom of the scoreboard, and there's a scale in centimeters on the top of the scoreboard. I use inch measurements, and I always do half of an inch from the left side. So sometimes I have to turn around my papers to get all the score lines I need. Also, when I mark my papers, I always make sure that I put the letter or the number in the right orientation so that I know when I lay down the sheet onto my scoreboard that once I can read the letter, then it's the right orientation to score on the left side of the paper. Of course, this works not for the pockets, as I have to score on 3 sides of the pockets, but for all the flaps it works really well, and it helps me to not score on the wrong side. Once I finished all the scoring and I have all my score lines ready, I then put the tape on all of these sheets. And as I said, I like to use the score pile tape. It's really strong, and you can actually whip it just from the roll. As you can see, I started with using my metal ruler to rip it off. And I really like to use it with tape which is wider than this one. But I noticed that for this tape, I just can use my fingernail and hold down the tape I placed next to the score line and then just rip it off, and I'm much faster than I would be when I grab the ruler first and always use the ruler to have this clean, nice edge. And I also cut the edges in the next step anyway, so they don't have to be straight, and it's no problem at all when there's tape hanging on the edges. So now that I have tape on all my different paper sheets, I get my scissors. I actually use my small scissors for this, and I cut off all the edges of the tape. And I cut it in an angle because when you cut it in an angle and you use the flaps and you want to cover it with your pattern paper, it's better to hide the edges when you cut it in an angle. So, but you would want to make sure that you're not cutting into the score line, but away from the score line. So I always like to turn around the paper. This way I can see the score line better. And then it's probably best to cut away from the score line, but I have to say I cut in both ways because I'm just faster if I do it like this. But yeah, just be careful to not cut into the score line. So the last thing I want to share with you in this video today is how I store my different collection kits I like to use for my mini albums. And as you can see, I really love using these plastic containers by Craftalia Basics. They just hold all the different pattern papers as well as the embellishments that come with the kit. And sometimes I also like to place some matching ribbon inside or some solid cardstock. And yes, so every time I want to use a collection for my mini album, I just grab the box from my IKEA Kallax shelf, and then I like to transfer everything into these little organizers I have sitting on my desk. They are also from IKEA, and I think they're really great. So I have all the smaller embellishments in the smaller compartments, and then I have my pattern paper and everything ready to decorate my mini album. So yeah, that's it for my first video on how I make my 8x8 mini albums. And in the next video, I will show you how I do my album covers as well as how I make my hinge for the album. So I really hope that you enjoyed the video today and that it was helpful for you just to see how I prepare for my mini albums and which tools I like to use. If you like my video, I would be more than happy to get your feedback in the comments. As I'm just a beginner, I'm just starting YouTube. I would really love to read some feedback. And yeah, thank you for watching and see you in the next video.